I think she's very nice, Trump began, but very low IQ. Between her and Crockett, we're going to give them both an IQ test to see who comes out best. I took my test at Walter Reed Medical Center, I aced it. Every question. Now it's their turn. He consistently pushed this narrative, implying that women of color were somehow low IQ. Jasmine Crockett didn't hesitate. I have far more education than he does, she said, her voice steady. I earned every degree on my own. My father didn't make a phone call to get me into anything. Let's stop pretending I'm somehow lesser than anyone else. No sir, you will not get a third term. The Constitution is clear, and frankly, you should never have had one term, let alone two. Her words were sharp, but Michelle Obama followed with a calm authority that left an impact. Your incompetence has shown, and even your allies are disappointed. You are a loser, dragging us all down with your failures. Trump's narrow, threatened worldview was on display. His fear of hardworking, highly educated black women was palpable. Yet Crockett and Obama didn't rise to his bait. They didn't shout. They didn't flail. They raised the standard. The night of the televised town hall at Atlanta's Civic Center, moderated by CNN's Rachel Mitchell, was meant to be a calm discussion on women's leadership. But when Crockett and Obama took the stage, the atmosphere shifted. They weren't there for drama. They were there for truth. And truth, as millions would soon see, often comes wrapped in confrontation. Rachel introduced the panel with poise. Tonight we discuss leadership, responsibility, and the future of women in America. The crowd applauded politely. Jasmine smiled, hands folded neatly. Michelle leaned back, calm but alert. Then, Rachel's earpiece crackled. She paused, glanced at the producer, and her eyes widened. We've just been informed President Trump will join us live via video from Washington. The audience gasped, a mix of shock, disbelief, and curiosity. Some clapped, others groaned. Michelle straightened. Jasmine adjusted her mic. Unreadable, Trump appeared on the massive LED screen, sitting in the Oval Office. Good evening, he began, voice steady but confident. I thought I'd join to offer some balance. People are tired of lectures from politicians pretending to be moral guides. We need strong voices, not emotional ones. Jasmine tilted her head, analyzing the screen like a chess master. Michelle offered a controlled, diplomatic smile. Well, Mr. President, she said evenly, we're glad you could join us. We were just discussing what real leadership looks like in times of division. Trump grinned. That's why I'm here. Strong voices, not emotional ones. Jasmine's reply was calm but cutting. Strength without empathy isn't leadership. It's intimidation. The audience reacted instantly, some clapping, some booing. Oh please, Congresswoman, Trump interrupted. You and your friends talk about empathy, identity, feelings. What has that done for jobs, safety, the economy? Jasmine didn't flinch. Women-led initiatives have driven some of the fastest-growing small business recoveries in the country. Empathy isn't weakness, it's the foundation of trust. You can't lead a nation if you can't listen to its people. Michelle nodded silently, letting Jasmine lead. The crowd, sensing history, fell into a hush. Trump smirked. You sound rehearsed, Jasmine. Too many talking points. You sound threatened. Facts challenge feelings, she replied softly, precision in her words, not anger. Applause surged through the hall. Even Rachel cracked a small smile. Michelle finally spoke. Calm. Firm. Unshakable. Women don't need permission to lead. We've been leading quietly for generations, raising families, running communities, solving problems others ignored. The only difference now is that people are finally watching. Trump attempted to cut in, but the crowd's cheers drowned him out for the first time. His confident expression wavered, revealing the power of composure and truth over bluster. Jasmine leaned forward, her gaze steady. You said people are tired of lectures, Mr. President, but what they're really tired of is excuses. When leadership is all about self-promotion, the country loses faith. When it's about service, people remember why democracy matters. Trump exhaled sharply. You're good with words, Congresswoman, but words don't win elections, results do. Let's talk results. Gladly, she replied. Under female-led city programs across Texas and Georgia, homelessness dropped by double digits. Under bipartisan initiatives led by women in Congress, small business grants reached record highs. Those are results you might not like, but America is noticing. The hall erupted in applause. Jasmine's tone never rose, her calm carried more force than his bluster. Michelle leaned slightly toward the screen, her voice measured, almost intimate, as if speaking to every woman watching at home. Leadership isn't about domination. It's about service. Real power doesn't come from silencing others, it comes from lifting them up. The words hit like thunder. Even dissenters couldn't look away. Rachel tried to guide the discussion back to policy, but the energy had shifted. This wasn't politics anymore, it was a mirror, a reckoning. The room was subtly, irreversibly electric, then came the moment to test civility. Cameras zoomed on Jasmine's composed face. Every word, every breath, mattered. The town hall had become a live demonstration of composure. Trump leaned back on the screen, the Oval Office flag framing him perfectly. You talk a good game, Congresswoman, but Americans want results, not lectures about feelings or history. All I see from your side are excuses and victimhood. Gasps echoed through the hall. Some booed, others cheered. Rachel tried to intervene, but Jasmine raised a hand, not to silence anyone, but to hold her ground. Mr. President, she said, calm but piercing, even victimhood isn't what women fight for. We fight for recognition, for space, for fairness. Every result worth celebrating in this country came from someone daring to challenge what was considered normal. Trump smiled thinly. That's cute. But ideals don't win. People care about action. Jasmine didn't blink. Then perhaps we should redefine action. Listening, truly listening, is one of the hardest actions there is. It's what good leadership requires, but what's rarely practiced. Applause surged again. Rachel signaled to cut to commercial, but the producer shook his head. Ratings were skyrocketing. Michelle spoke softly beside Jasmine. Donald, this isn't about sides. It's about responsibility. You have power. Jasmine has power. I have power. The question is, how do we use it? Trump leaned forward, smirking. I use it to win. That's the difference. You talk about empathy, I talk about success. Michelle's smile never wavered. One without the other doesn't last. History proves it again and again. He chuckled. People don't remember empathy. They remember strength. They remember dominance. Jasmine glanced at the screen. And they remember who abused it. The line landed like a hammer. The crowd roared. Phones lifted. Clips were already flooding social media. The moderator's voice cracked. Let's maintain order. But order was gone. The conversation had crossed into raw, unscripted territory. Trump waved dismissively. You're all so dramatic. Everything's about gender and race. People want results, not feelings about oppression. Jasmine's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice stayed calm. With all due respect, sir, you cannot fix what you refuse to see. If people are still begging for fairness, then the system you're defending isn't working as well as you think. Michelle placed a gentle hand on Jasmine's arm, not to stop her, but to steady the shared weight of the moment. Trump shook his head. You sound angry. Anger isn't the problem, Jasmine said quickly. Silence fell. The crowd was on its feet, clapping, shouting, filming. Michelle's voice softened. Donald, every time a woman speaks her truth, it's labeled as anger. When a man interrupts, it's called leadership. That double standard has existed long enough, don't you think? He leaned back. That's your opinion. It's lived reality, Jasmine shot back. Ask the millions of women who carry this country every day, at home, at work, in Congress. We don't ask for pity, we ask for honesty. A woman in the audience shouted, and the hall erupted. Michelle turned to the crowd. This is why we're here, not to argue, but to remind America that leadership has a moral center. You can't tweet your way into respect. Trump's eyes narrowed. I have respect, more than anyone in this room. Jasmine leaned closer to the microphone. Respect isn't something you declare. It's something you earn. The words hung in the air. Even Trump paused, the weight of her statement sinking in. Cameras cut to the audience, some tearful, some stunned. Then Trump broke the silence. You're very good at talking, Congresswoman. Maybe that's all people expect from you, talk. Her expression didn't change. Then she leaned in and said, listen carefully, because sometimes, talk is the only weapon truth has left. A murmur ran through the audience. The tension in the room became electric, thick with the sense that something irreversible was unfolding right before their eyes. Michelle turned slightly, looking past Trump, past the cameras, toward the millions watching at home. We all want to make this country better, she said, but we cannot do it if leadership means tearing people down to stand taller. That's not strength, that's fear wearing a suit. The crowd erupted again. Trump shifted, visibly irritated. He adjusted his tie, forcing a tight smile. Maybe next time, he said, invite someone who actually understands the economy instead of two people reading from emotion. Jasmine let out a small, measured laugh. Emotion built this country. Courage built it. Compassion saved it. And when the cameras stop rolling, that's what will keep it together. Rachel scanned the audience, realizing the event had evolved into something no producer could have scripted. History was happening in real time, words becoming memory, debate becoming legacy. Michelle wasn't done. The room grew silent as she prepared to speak, her words would cut through even the loudest voices. The studio lights reflected faint silhouettes of the two women, calm yet commanding under the nation's gaze. Jasmine had spoken with precision and fire, but now all eyes shifted to Michelle. Her presence wasn't louder or harsher, just heavier, resonant. The crowd held its breath. Trump sat framed on the screen behind them, smirk back in place, fingers steepled. Go ahead, Michelle, he said. Tell us how feelings can fix the economy. Michelle tilted her head, studying him as if assessing a student trying too hard to appear confident. This isn't about feelings, she said. It's about values. When leadership loses its moral compass, everything else follows. Trump chuckled audibly. Moral compass? Please. I've done more for this country than any president before me, look at the numbers. Michelle didn't flinch. Numbers don't tell the whole story. They never have. They don't measure compassion. They don't measure trust. They definitely don't measure what people feel when they look at their leaders and see arrogance instead of service. The audience broke into applause. Phones glowed like lanterns in the darkened hall. Trump waved a dismissive hand. You were never elected, Michelle, you were just lucky to marry someone who was. The words hit like a slap, but she didn't blink. Her smile wasn't for show, it said, I've heard worse. You're right, she said, tone unshaken. I wasn't elected. But I spent 8 years watching what leadership looks like when it's about people, not ego. I saw what happens when someone walks into a room and listens instead of talks. You might call that weakness, but I call it wisdom. Cheers surged through the hall. Jasmine glanced at Michelle with quiet admiration, a shared respect between two women holding the weight of a national spotlight that could turn hostile at any second. Trump leaned forward again. You know what, Michelle? People don't want lectures about morality. They want results. You're talking about feelings because you can't talk about winning. Michelle exhaled slowly, her voice dropping slightly. Winning? You think leadership is about winning? Leadership isn't a game, Mr. President. When you see it that way, you start treating people like opponents instead of citizens. Her words echoed in the hall. Silence followed, no applause, just the quiet hum of anticipation and the clicks of cameras. Jasmine's voice broke through, calm and steady. The truth is, real leadership means doing the right thing, even when it's unpopular. History remembers those moments more than slogans. Trump smirked. History remembers who's strong. Michelle looked directly at the lens, speaking to every living room in America. And history also remembers who was cruel. The weight of her words hung in the air. Even the moderators stayed silent, knowing not to interrupt. Rachel cleared her throat finally. "Let's keep this focused on the topic of leadership," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Trump nodded. "Fine. I'll tell you what leadership is. It's being willing to do what others are too afraid to do. It's standing firm, even if people hate you for it." Michelle's voice lowered, calm but unyielding. Standing firm isn't the same as refusing to listen. When you lead by fear, you get obedience. When you lead by respect, you get loyalty. That's the difference. The crowd erupted again. Someone shouted, "Say it louder." Laughter rolled through the seats, breaking tension for a brief moment. Trump's jaw tightened. "You're good at speeches, Michelle. Always have been. But speeches don't run nations." Michelle leaned back slightly, still composed. "Neither do tantrums." The remark landed hard. Even Jasmine had to suppress a small smile. Producers scrambled, unsure whether to cut the feed or let it play, but everyone knew this had become a cultural flashpoint. Michelle turned toward Jasmine, her tone softening. "When I think about leadership, I think about the women who get up before dawn, work 2 jobs, and still show up for their kids' school meetings. I think about teachers who buy supplies with their own money. I think about nurses who hold a stranger's hand after a 12-hour shift. That's leadership." Jasmine nodded, moved. "And none of those people have to step on anyone to do it." Trump interjected. "You're describing ordinary people. I'm talking about power." Michelle looked back, unwavering. "Exactly. Power without purpose is just noise." The crowd rose again. Applause thundered across the stage. Rachel's mic nearly caught feedback from the volume. Michelle let it fade, then added quietly, "The problem, Mr. President, is too many people think leadership is about control. It's not. It's about responsibility, the kind that doesn't disappear when the cameras turn off." The lights shimmered across her face. The room hung on her every word. Even Trump hesitated, unsure whether to respond. Jasmine leaned in softly. "Michelle, I think that's what people needed to hear." Michelle offered a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes," she said softly, "truth doesn't need volume. It just needs space." The audience responded, not with wild cheering, but with a standing ovation that carried an unexpected sense of unity. Supporters, skeptics, journalists, everyone seemed to understand that something bigger than politics was unfolding. Trump remained motionless for a few seconds, then forced a chuckle. "You two should start a talk show," he muttered. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, eyes steady. "No, Mr. President," she said. "We already have one. It's called America." The crowd erupted once more. But the night wasn't over. The next exchange would transform a heated debate into a defining moment of truth, one even Trump couldn't anticipate. When the cameras returned from a brief break, the atmosphere in the Atlanta Civic Center had shifted completely. What had begun as a discussion now felt like a collision of 2 worlds, one clinging to power, the other daring to redefine it. Phones remained raised. The audience knew they were witnessing a moment that would live far beyond the broadcast. Rachel Mitchell, trying to regain control, cleared her throat. "All right, everyone, let's bring it back. This conversation has clearly struck a chord. Let's talk about what leadership looks like in practice, not in theory." Before she could finish, Trump cut in, his voice slicing through the hum of anticipation. "I'll tell you what it looks like," he said. "It looks like putting America first, standing up to weak politicians, and refusing to apologize for success. I built an economy that worked. I put people back to work. That's leadership. Applause rose from a few audience members but was quickly drowned out by boos from others. Jasmine leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on her knees. Her voice was precise, grounded. That's one version, she said. But leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the voice for people who aren't being heard. Trump laughed. You love slogans, don't you? Jasmine didn't smile. No, she said quietly. I love accountability. A low hum of approval rippled through the crowd. Michelle rested her hands on the table in front of her, posture straight, gaze steady. Donald, she said, measured, you keep talking about success, but success without empathy is hollow. You measure leadership by profit margins. We measure it by people's lives. Trump scoffed. You think I don't care about people? I've done more for this country than anyone sitting in that room. Michelle's response was quiet, firm. Then why do so many people feel unseen? The audience fell silent. Trump blinked, caught off guard. Rachel tried to intervene. Let's stay focused on leadership values, she said softly. Trump pressed on, voice rising. People feel unseen because the media lies to them. Politicians like you sell division while pretending to care. Jasmine's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Division doesn't start with the people asking to be treated equally, she said. It starts with those who refuse to see equality as a shared goal. Steady applause followed, not loud, but deliberate, like agreement taking shape. Trump shook his head. You've got all your talking points ready, you probably practiced this. Jasmine met his gaze on the monitor. You don't need practice to speak truth, Mr. President. You just need courage. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, landing like a direct challenge even through the screen. Trump exhaled sharply, defensive. You think you're better than me because you talk nice on TV. You and Michelle love your fancy words, but I actually get things done. Michelle leaned forward slightly, calm yet steely. No one is questioning your ability to act, she said. We're questioning why your actions leave people behind. Another wave of applause rolled through the audience. Even some of Trump's supporters couldn't ignore the precision of her words. Jasmine added softly, power isn't about how many people fear you. It's about how many people trust you. Trump shot back. Fear keeps people in line. Michelle shook her head slowly. No, Donald. Fear breaks nations. The room hung on that line. Even camera operators hesitated before moving. Rachel tried to interject. But Trump interrupted, raising his voice. You're all acting like saints. You talk about unity, but you spend your careers blaming others. That's not leadership, that's hypocrisy. Jasmine's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained calm. You call it hypocrisy when people demand justice. But justice doesn't happen quietly. You can't fix a wound by pretending it's not bleeding. Gasp after gasp ran through the audience. The weight of her words was unmistakable. Trump crossed his arms. You really think you can fix everything with speeches? Michelle smiled faintly. No, she said. But speeches build movements. Movements build nations. That's how change has always started, not from anger, but from clarity. A hush fell again. Trump shifted uncomfortably, trying to regain his footing. Jasmine broke the silence. You said leadership is about standing firm even when people hate you. But there's a difference between being bold and being cruel, and America is learning to tell the difference. Trump exhaled loudly, leaning forward. You two talk a lot about compassion. But compassion doesn't build borders, fix trade deals, or stop wars. Michelle replied softly, no, it doesn't. But compassion prevents the kind of wars that start in people's hearts long before they reach the battlefield. For a long, charged moment, neither side spoke. Even through the cameras, the tension was palpable, crackling like electricity in the air. Jasmine finally turned toward Michelle, voice calm but piercing. You know what I think the problem is? Michelle looked at her, waiting. Some people think leadership is about control, Jasmine said. But control is fragile. It shatters when people stop being afraid. Thunderous applause erupted across the hall, voices rising in waves of agreement. Trump frowned, visibly irritated. You can have the applause. I'll keep the presidency. Michelle's gaze met the camera again. Then use it to serve, she said, because the world is watching. What kind of power do you believe in? The applause swelled into cheers. Even Rachel seemed swept up in the emotion flooding the room. In that instant, it became clear, this wasn't just a clash of political ideals. It was a moral confrontation broadcast to millions, but the real turning point wasn't the debate itself, it was what Jasmine said next. Her statement was raw, direct, and shifted the tone of the entire night. The applause hadn't even died down when Rachel leaned toward her mic, trying to restore some order. All right, she said with a strained smile, let's bring it back to our main topic, leadership in times of division. No one was looking at her anymore. Every camera, every lens, every eye in the room was on Jasmine. She sat perfectly still, expression thoughtful, a slow inhale hinting at the storm to come. Then she leaned forward, elbows on the table. Mr. President, you said leadership is about winning. Let's talk about that. Trump shifted in his chair on the screen, half grinning. Go ahead. I like a good lecture. Jasmine didn't take the bait. When Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, she wasn't trying to win. When Shirley Chisholm ran for president in 1972, she wasn't trying to win. They were trying to change something, to make people see what was wrong. They didn't measure victory in polls or ratings, they measured it in courage. The room fell silent, no murmurs, no phones, just awe, the kind that hits like thunder. Trump started to respond, but Jasmine wasn't finished. You've made people believe leadership is about dominance, being louder, meaner, more stubborn. But when the lights go off, when the crowd goes home, dominance means nothing if people don't trust you. Journalists' fingers clicked on keyboards, quoting her line word for word. Trump tried to brush it off. You love your speeches, but speeches don't build businesses or pay bills. Jasmine's eyes stayed locked on the camera. Neither does disrespect. Neither does arrogance. You can build all the towers you want, but if they're built on contempt, they'll crumble. Every empire that forgot its people fell, not from weakness, but from pride. Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by a heavy wave of applause. Michelle turned to Jasmine, quietly approving. That's what this is about, she said softly, then back to the screen. Donald, people want to believe again, not in politicians, but in decency. Trump's jaw tensed. Decency doesn't protect borders. It doesn't stop inflation. It doesn't make deals. Michelle's voice dropped lower. No, but it keeps nations from breaking apart. And right now, that's worth more than any deal you've ever signed. For the first time, Trump didn't respond immediately. The control room feed zoomed in, catching a flicker of hesitation across his expression. Rachel cleared her throat. Congresswoman Crockett, Mrs. Obama, I think the country is hearing something tonight it hasn't heard in a while. Michelle nodded. Honesty without hate, she said, as applause swelled again, echoing like a drumbeat through the hall. Trump, growing impatient, tried to interrupt. You know, Michelle, people love your speeches, but the world doesn't run on hope. It runs on strength. Hope is strength, she replied softly. The difference is it builds instead of breaks. Jasmine turned to Rachel. Can I say one more thing? Rachel gestured. Please. Jasmine faced the camera, voice steady. When I was a public defender, I met women who worked 3 jobs, raised their kids alone, and still found time to volunteer at their churches. They never made the news. They never got thanked. But they held their communities together. That's leadership too. It's not loud. It's not glamorous. But it's real. The audience rose, clapping in rhythm, some with tears in their eyes. Women held up phones, whispering to each other, recording. Trump tried to regain control. That's a nice story, but running a country isn't the same as running a household. Jasmine's voice was instant, unwavering. That's where you're wrong. The people who run households are the ones who understand sacrifice. They know what it means to make decisions that hurt today but help tomorrow. That's leadership in its purest form. And maybe if Washington learned that, we'd all be better off. Cheers thundered through the building. Michelle leaned closer to her mic. The truth is, this country doesn't need a savior. It needs servants, people willing to lead without the need to be worshipped. The line echoed, crisp and final. Trump laughed, but this time, it didn't sound confident. You two sound rehearsed. Michelle smiled faintly. Experience isn't rehearsal. The crowd roared again, a wave of sound that shook the room. Rachel struggled to maintain control. All right, she said, voice strained, I think we can all agree this conversation has gone further than any of us expected tonight. Jasmine leaned forward, calm but resolute. That's what happens when truth shows up. Trump rolled his eyes. You've got a lot of opinions, Congresswoman. We'll see how far that gets you. She responded gently but firmly, it got me here, across from you, live on national television, speaking for millions who've waited too long to be heard. A rumble of cheers swelled again, echoing off the walls of the Civic Center. Trump smirked, leaning closer to the camera. You really think you won this? Jasmine glanced at Michelle, then back at him. There's nothing to win, only something to remember. For a moment, even Trump had no words. The feed from Washington seemed to freeze, as if the air itself had paused. Rachel's voice came softly through the speakers. We're going to take a short break, she said. The camera cut to black, but the energy in the room didn't fade. Michelle leaned toward Jasmine, whispering something barely audible over the buzz. You just changed the conversation. Jasmine smiled, eyes still on the darkened screen. Let's hope they were listening. When the show returned, the nation itself would become part of the story, and what happened next would extend far beyond that Atlanta stage. By the time the broadcast ended, the air in the Civic Center felt thick with adrenaline. Reporters were already on their feet, racing to the lobby to file stories. The audience buzzed with disbelief and exhilaration. Everyone knew they had witnessed something historic, even if no one yet understood how far the impact would reach. Outside, the Atlanta night pulsed with activity. News vans lined the streets. Anchors stood under harsh lights, rehearsing their opening lines. A fiery exchange tonight between President Trump, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, and former First Lady Michelle Obama. Across networks, the words repeated like a drumbeat, traveling coast to coast. Backstage, Jasmine sat quietly, still in her blazer, microphone clipped. A stagehand offered her water, but she barely noticed, lost in the last few minutes replaying on loop. Every pause, every word, every glance. Michelle approached, unhurried, as if she had done this 1,000 times. She handed Jasmine the bottle. You did good, she said softly. Jasmine exhaled, finally taking a sip. I don't know, it felt like shouting into a storm. Michelle smiled. That's what storms are for, clearing the air. A staffer peeked in. Ma'am, your clips are already trending. #1 on Twitter. Jasmine blinked, startled. Michelle chuckled. You didn't just speak to a crowd, Jasmine. You spoke to a generation that's been waiting for someone to say it. Jasmine's phone buzzed non-stop, mentions, calls, interviews. On the TV in the corner, CNN replayed her line, power isn't about how many people fear you, it's about how many people trust you. The caption read, Moment of the Year. She shook her head. I didn't plan that. It just came out. That's why it worked. Michelle nodded. The truth never sounds rehearsed. Meanwhile, in Washington, Trump's aides scrambled to control the narrative. Within minutes, a White House spokesperson was on Fox News defending the president. The president was simply emphasizing strong leadership, while others prefer emotional talking points. But the clips told a different story. Every network replayed the confrontation in slow motion, Jasmine's poised stare, Michelle's quiet restraint, Trump's tightening jaw, memes spreading like wildfire. Hashtags erupted, hashtag Crockett and Michelle, hashtag Women for Truth, hashtag Leadership over Ego. By morning, they had amassed over 40 million impressions. Michelle, in her hotel suite, robe on and coffee in hand, watched the coverage. Her phone buzzed endlessly, senators, journalists, old friends, even celebrities, but her expression remained calm. She had seen public storms before, then her phone lit up again, a message from Barack, "You too did good." Reminded people what leadership looks like. She smiled quietly, setting the phone down. Meanwhile, Jasmine was back in her Dallas apartment, sleep-deprived. Her phone had become a battlefield, hundreds of supportive texts, and just as many filled with anger or threats. She had grown used to criticism, but this was different. She turned on the TV. Every channel had her face.